It seems that with the rise of crossovers and electrification, a lot of car manufacturers have forgotten about the joy that there is in small, efficient city cars. Now, Toyota has famously been one of the very best at making such cars, which is why it's created this, the Aygo Cross. Now, it's much like the conventional Aygo in that it's small and designed for urban environments, but the Cross version tries to infuse some of that chunky crossover appeal that people are really going after at the moment. So, can the Aygo Cross, without its hybrid engine, without its extra trimmings, compete with those crossovers that people really do want at the moment? Well, we're going to drive it today to find out. We really like the look of the Aygo Cross. It takes that compact body style and just lifts it with some chunky plastic mouldings and some contrast elements which really do help it to stand out. For such a small car, it's actually got quite a lot of presence. And just so we're clear, that Cross is pronounced Cross rather than X, somewhat confusingly. You might notice that the proportions of the Aygo Cross have changed compared to the previous Aygo, and that's because it no longer shares a platform with cars like the Citroën C1 or the Peugeot 108. It is in fact based on a slightly shortened version of the Yaris platform. But that also means that it gets to have some new technology. So all cars come with a central screen, but this one, being a high-spec car, has a large 9-inch display, which actually is pretty good to use. It's relatively clear, though it can be a little bit clunky and a little bit dim-witted. You also get a small TFT monitor in front of you, and you also get an analog speed dial, which is actually quite refreshing nowadays. This multifunction steering wheel is also very useful and controls your cruise control and your volume controls, and there are some nice physical dials for the heating and ventilation. The material quality is not the best, but you do get some nice cross stitching on the seats, and you do get a nice view of the road ahead with slim pillars and decent size wing mirrors. In the back of the Aygo Cross, you can see that there's not a lot of space really. The front seat is in my position. I'm just under 6 foot and my knees are flat against it, though having said that, I've got a decent amount of space for my feet. The seats are flat and you're only going to get 2 people in here. And though there are ISOFIX points, one of the biggest issues with the Aygo is the door aperture. These just don't open very wide at all. So even though you can fit car seats back here, getting them in is going to be a right old pain. And the doors themselves are really light and very tinny. So you do have to be careful when the wind is picking up. Given that the Aygo Cross is such a compact vehicle, it's obviously not going to offer the most amount of boot space, but at 231 litres, there's actually a decent amount of room back here, and it's also quite deep, so you will be able to get larger items in there. Plus, you can fold down the rear seats, which does extend that load area to take those slightly larger items. Now, the Aygo Cross doesn't do with any fancy hybrid system or petrol-electric setup. No, we've got a 1 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine under the bonnet, naturally aspirated, with around about 71 brake horsepower, which is not a lot, of course. And it does equate to a 0 to 60 mile an hour time of just over 14.5 seconds, which is a long time. So you really do have to be quite committed with your throttle and keep all of that momentum going in order to make steady progress, particularly along undulating roads like the ones we're on today. Now, interestingly, we've got a 5-speed gearbox in this car, and the lower gears are quite tall. So in fact, in second, you can hit 60 miles an hour, providing you've got enough space. But then when you're on the motorway travelling at 70 miles an hour, the engine really is buzzing, and there it's building quite a lot of revs. So it seems like the wrong compromise. I'd quite like a shorter gearing lower down to give you some slightly more eager performance. Than on the motorway, you might have the opportunity for the engine to actually refine itself a little bit more. But as it is, you do have to work it quite hard to make your steady progress, and you are getting quite a lot of noise coming through to the cabin. Other cars in this class will get you a 4-cylinder, and those bring far more refinement than the engine in the Aygo brings. However, what the Aygo Cross lacks in performance, it makes up for in efficiency, with Toyota claiming up to 58 mpg, which is exceptional really, and I've been driving it in a variety of mixed routes, and I've been seeing 54 without really trying, so I reckon that claim figure is pretty on the money. This setup does just feel, well, a little bit old school in this day and age, with the 1 litre turbo engines that we're seeing in a lot of cars like the Fiesta or the Polo, really showcasing how small capacity engines can deliver on refinement too. This engine just is very vocal, and it's not been accompanied by a great deal of pace either. So despite that efficiency gain, you do have to question why would you have this engine in this car? Another thing worth mentioning is the clutch. Its biting point is really high, and you do have to give it quite a lot of gas to get it moving. And so even though you might have been driving for a little while, driving the Aygo makes you feel like you are back in your first car again, trying to manage the clutch. That said, we've got nice light steering, and the gearbox itself is really light in its action. Small turning circle and very agile handling means that this car is actually very easy to drive around urban and town environments, which is of course where it's designed for. It's also really easy to park too. You do have to remember, of course, that this isn't a particularly cheap car. Top spec versions of the Aygo will retail for in the region of 17 grand, which is a lot of money for a car with a small 3-cylinder engine that will only do 60 miles an hour in 14.5 seconds. Of course, performance isn't everything at the end of the day, but it does seem like a lot of money for not a lot of engine and not a lot of space either. I will say, however, that the visibility in the Aygo Cross is very good. There's a large rear window, and the forward view is uncluttered because you've got these relatively slim pillars. Over the shoulder, wow, that is covered up a bit by the seat, and then looking through the small window section at the back. But overall, it's not too bad, and you've got to remember this is a small car, so it's not difficult to judge where your corners are. The Aygo Cross presents a bit of a conflict, really. On the one hand, it's got loads of character, and it's going to be cheap to run and cheap to insure too. However, it is quite costly for what you're getting, considering you are only having a 3-cylinder engine with a 5-speed gearbox. In this segment, there are cars that do things better for less money. Hyundai's i10 is one such example. If you do want a car that is small and cheap to run, then the Aygo Cross will be a good option. But in this area, there are going to be cars that provide more for less. Thank you for watching this new car review on the Aygo Cross for Motors.co.uk. Now, what do you think of this small car? Could you put up with a 3-cylinder engine? Let us know in the comments below. And since you're here, please leave us a like if you have enjoyed this video. Plus, please remember to subscribe to the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel, hit on that bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new review.